Nice to meet you guys. Thanks.
Welcome everybody. Welcome to this evening's Meet the Candidates event. I'm Jodie Newcomb. I'm going to be your MC for this evening. It's great to see so many people here, and I'd like to start by welcoming our candidates. Thank you so much for joining us here on Judgerong country. I'd like to pay my respects to all elders past, present and emerging, and to any First Nations people with us tonight. Tonight we'll be speaking to the three candidates with us tonight who are running for the seat of Bendigo in the upcoming federal election. So welcome to Lisa Chesters, to Sam Gayed, and to Robert Holian. We will be asking the candidates to introduce themselves more fully in a moment. But first, a few thanks. This evening is brought to you by the sustainability sessions that take place here at the Taproom the third Tuesday of every month. It's an opportunity to meet local sustainability professionals and hear about the great work they're doing in our community and to network. Also, we are partnering with Democracy for Dinner, who are a community engagement platform for exploring policy issues and alternative models for democracy. Also the Mount Alexander Sustainability Group and the Taproom, who I think are the best hosts in town. Thank you to Democracy for Dinner for also bringing us the OurSay platform, who's provided this platform for free, which is a way for us to crowdsource the questions beforehand and make sure that there's a really open and fair model for that. They were founded to improve ways that government engages with their communities on decisions that affect them, and we're grateful for that free use of their platform. Tonight will also be live streamed. Up here we've got Adam from Democracy for Dinner with his iPhone connected to the Democracy for Dinner Facebook page and also the Castlemaine page, and that will be recorded on YouTube and put up on the Democracy for Dinner website. So lots of opportunities to engage with a whole bunch of the electorate tonight. I think there's 9,000 people in Castlemaine. It's a bit of a phenomenon in our community. So after we hear from the candidates, we're going to go through it's actually 4 questions. 3 were going to be selected, but there's 24 questions altogether, 90 votes, and the top 2 received 11 each, and then the next 2 received 9 each. So we've got 4, and then our candidates are going to have 2 minutes to respond to those questions. There'll be a follow-up question, so each of the people who've asked the questions will pose that question. I'm going to pass the microphone to each of them. If they want to ask a follow-up question, they may, and the candidates will have a minute to respond to that. But if they want to pass it to the audience, and if someone in the audience has a follow-up question to that subject matter, that's an opportunity to jump in. I'll then also select 2 questions, wildcard questions from what was on the platform, and I will also hand to you guys for follow-up if you'd like on those. And we've got Natalie over here is going to be putting up that card for 1-minute warnings just to give you a sense of where you're at in your discussion. And I'll be keeping time. So without further ado, I'd like to pass to, let's start with Lisa. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, and can I also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land in which we meet and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging. It's good to be here, back here at the Taproom, and it's good to see so many friends in the audience, including the ones that challenge me all the time, and I know tonight is going to get, we're going to get lots of challenges, and that's what democracy is about, and that's kind of one of the key themes I wanted to hit on first. This is one of the most important elections that we've had in a very long time, because this is about the kind of country we want to be in. Do we want to be a country where the government is run by fear and rhetoric, that doesn't put any decent policy out there, that tears other people down, that wedges our community? Or do we want a government that's actually going to engage with you, put out the policies, engage with you, build towards a better society, a society where we all have access, we all have opportunity, and we're actually delivering more of a fair go. Inequality in our country is at a 75-year high. That's a problem. There is a climate emergency going on. That is a problem. We've got our Indigenous Australians, where we've had their ask for an Indigenous voice ignored. That is a problem. Just a few of the many issues that we need to tackle as a country, and I'm sure we'll explore that tonight.
My name is Sam Gayed. I'm the Liberal candidate for Bendigo. Thank you for inviting me tonight. It's a very beautiful place. I'm happy to be with you. A little bit about myself. I am an engineer and a businessman, having managed major telecom projects in Australia and overseas in more than 5 countries. I also run a business with my incredible wife, who works as a doctor in mental health. I'm a father of 3 children who I have raised in Bendigo since 2013. Additionally, I am active in Bendigo Tennis Association, where I still play, but very poorly. So thank you for inviting me. If we want to have a bit of introduction about the coalition government, and I'll say briefly that we inherited from Labour 6 years ago a budget deficit of $48 billion. And over 6 years, this deficit has come down to $4 billion this year, and it's going to be a surplus next year. And we know why this has happened, why there was a budget deficit, and we know the policies that can result in a budget surplus, and that's why I'm standing up as a candidate to defend those policies, because it affects our daily life, and we need to be proactive in defending those policies and defending our wealth and our prosperity. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Robert Holian. I'm the candidate for the Greens. So it's so nice to see so many of you here in the audience, such a captive audience, so thank you for allowing me to speak in front of you tonight. Just a little bit about myself, because I understand there are a few people in the audience who probably know me now from campaigning, but there are quite a few people in the room that don't know me very well. I'm a GP in Bendigo, and I've worked at Bendigo Health for a few years as well as a junior doctor, and I've also worked in Kyneton as a GP too, before my current position. What I'm trying to say when I start by introducing myself that way is that politics was never part of the plan for me. I've spent probably a majority of my life working towards the point where I get to be a GP now. But the problem that I keep seeing year after year after year when we get inaction on things like climate change is that basically what we're doing is we're gambling with the future of our young people in this country. So rather than feel powerless about it, I decided to run for Parliament because I don't think that the alternatives that we've got here tonight are enough. So what I want everyone to understand tonight is that we're all three, very, I think, talented people who are all representing different points of view. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree with anyone tonight, make sure that you use your vote wisely and vote for the person that represents your values. So that's how I'll start tonight. Thanks.
Thank you all three, and we can now turn to our first question, the most popular question of the Our Say platform, which comes from Bill Grant. I'm going to pass the microphone over to you, Bill.
Thank you, and thanks for coming along. My question is, do you accept the strong scientific evidence of human-caused climate change? And if so, what will you and your party do to ensure that Central Victoria and Australia reduce greenhouse gas emissions to meet Paris agreements, as well as adapt to climate change that we're already experiencing?
Would you like me to go first?
Yeah.
I've got this microphone problem, so I'll just take that one.
Sorry, we hadn't quite discussed the order of who responds first.
We'll take turns. We won't make everyone go first the first time. So would you like to start?
Yeah, I'd love to start. So, in terms of the science of climate change, the results are in. We know that climate change is hurting the planet. We know that the world has already warmed by at least 1 degree since the Industrial Revolution. The Paris Agreement aims to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. It's not much more. We know that the ANU and the Australian Conservation Foundation have modelled what the temperature change will be like by 2050 if we continue with business as usual. What will it be in this area? About 3 degrees warmer. 3 degrees, not 1.5, 3. So we need to fundamentally change what we're doing. And the Greens have the only policy, I believe, that is responsible in terms of the way we mitigate climate change. So we want to make sure that we have no new coal mines, no new fossil fuels, whether it be gas, oil, coal, don't care. None of it new. We need to stop digging this stuff out of the ground. We're the world's biggest coal exporter. 80% of the coal that we dig up out of the ground goes overseas and gets burnt and still contributes to climate change. So the Greens have a policy to phase out coal by 2030. Yeah, that's all right, thanks. What we want to replace that with, though, is clean, sustainable, renewable jobs. So we want to replace that with an industry of solar and wind farms that then replaces our energy needs. We can also make a hydrogen export industry that means that we don't have to rely on coal and oil and all these things that hurt us. We can do all of that. We are one of the wealthiest countries at one of the wealthiest times in history. We lack the political will to do so, and that's what I'm trying to bring tonight.
Sam, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very passionate about the environment, and I always look at how to address that, how to tackle this issue. And I looked back at history, and we had steam locomotives using coal, and it was used all the time, and then it's been replaced by diesel electric locomotives. How this happened, when a new technology starts and it gets developed, then it takes over because it becomes reliable and affordable. It didn't start this way. Diesel electric locomotives were very big when they when it started first. It was very heavy and the output power was very low. By time, this had changed. So at the beginning, it was only used in marine propulsion because of the weight. But then, after the technology has developed, it could be adopted. And this is the same way we should look about the current issue about coal or whatever. You need first to develop a reliable and affordable technology, invest more in it, and then it will take over without fight, without pushing the government. It will be adopted by businesses first. So it's not really a fight. It's rather invest more in this technology, and it's going to take over. We need to do it in a positive way, investing, rather than trying to shut down in the industries. We need to go in the positive direction by investing in the technology. The coalition government is meeting our international commitment, and that's good to meet our international commitment. Do you want to go beyond that? You need to first work out whether it's practical, whether it's achievable. So if the Greens want to go 100% in a shorter period,
Yep.
but did you think how are you going to do it? What's the effect on the economy? The practicalities. So we need to also look at the global picture. Thank you.
So in answer to the first part of the question, yes, we are in a climate emergency and man-made, and it is man-made. We have to accept that man and human beings are a big cause of the climate emergency that we have. So accepting the science, and not everybody who's in federal parliament does, but Labor does, we need to then work out how. How do you address that? How do you reach the Paris targets? Despite the rhetoric, emissions are going up. Australia used to be a world leader. We've plummeted. We are now following the rest of the world. So we need some pretty quick action to turn things around. So one of our first goals is 50% renewable energy by 2030. So we've got to get the investment quickly. A number of programs will underpin that. We want to see a power sharing grid. We're going to help neighbourhoods connect and have community solar and renewable energy projects. We'll put the money on the table to help do that. We've also committed to solar on schools. That's going to save money for the schools, but also help generate clean energy for those schools, help industries transition. We've also committed to a just transition. We want to phase out coal-fired power stations in Australia to cleaner, greener energy. The final one is about hitting a 45% reduction target in emissions. We need to decarbonise. That's causing a major problem. And Labor believes that we can work with industry, work with community to achieve it, hit those targets, and then we can keep going.
Thank you very much for those concise responses. It leaves a little bit of extra time, I think, for a follow-up, either from you, Bill, or someone else in the audience. I'm happy to take from the audience, and I think it also offers the candidates a little bit of a chance to respond to each other too. So, over here.
What about the costs of not taking action?
Did everyone hear that? That was the question was, what about the costs of not taking action on climate change? I might start actually with Sam in a minute.
Yeah, no one said that we wouldn't take action, but we say what's the action and at what pace you should go. This is important. If the international commitment specifies 26%, why do you want to go beyond that? So,
sorry.
yeah. So,
Answer the question.
so the cost of we didn't say we wouldn't take action. So we are taking
What are
action.
the costs of not taking action?
The cost the cost you should consider this point that Australia contributes 1.5% of the overall global emission. So the cost of not taking action is 98.5% of the job not being done. So if we don't take action in Australia, it's like 1.5% effect would not be achieved.
Lisa, would you like to respond?
Just to call that out for a moment, per capita, we are one of the highest emitters of carbon emissions in the world. And that's a problem. We are not taking responsibility individually, collectively, as a nation for what we are putting out. That is why we have to take action. That is why the 6 years of chaos have really hurt not just our economy, because it has. There is a cost to our economy by not acting on climate change, but it's also a cost to our community and it's a cost to our environment. The cost of not taking action, more extreme weather events, bushfires, floods, droughts. I was up in Shep yesterday. The Darling, the Murray-Darling, standout example. The river is drying sooner, quicker. We're having fish kills. That gets people attention. We've got to act on climate change. Then there's the health costs. The number of people that are now dying because of heat stress, because we can't keep our environment cool enough. Then we start to get to our native species, and the reports out today in the media, horrific.
Rob?
So there is an economic cost. The economic cost I can put simply in that the world will have moved on and we'll have an uncompetitive economy because the rest of the world will have decided that no, we can't continue to burn coal for the rest of eternity. But I think the environmental cost is the more compelling one, frankly. We're already starting to see mass extinction. We're already starting to see changes in the flora of our local environments, even the kinds of things that can grow, the kinds of things that farmers can grow. We know that precipitation, we know that rainfall is going down, and that farmers have had to change their soils to adapt to those challenges. That's the early sort of stuff, though. We're not sort of seeing the 80 days over 30. We're not seeing the 30 days over 40 yet, and that's all in our future. So yes, the cost of not acting is both economic, it is environmental, it is water, it is our farmers, it is our native species. As Australia, as we like to have it, as we like our communities to be, will unfortunately be under huge threat.
Thank you. Question number 2 is on the subject of community health, and it comes from Di Couch. Di, I'm going to pass you the microphone now.
Okay, there's been lots of discussion about the need for funding for health, but it's predominantly always in relation to hospitals. Many nurses and allied health staff could be doing more effective work in community settings rather than hospital. So what are you going to do in relation to funding to support the community health sector and support for preventative health, as happens internationally? That's the trend internationally.
Sorry, just a technical decision there in terms of the follow-up questions. We'll allow the candidates 2 minutes each because, to be fair, the follow-up question was actually kind of a brand new question. So we'll do that next round. Sorry about the rush there. Lisa, would you like to start to answer this one, please?
I'm a really big fan of community health, and it has a really big role to play in terms of helping people live healthier, preventative health, and we need to find a better funding model. So Labor's already committed in this election significant increase in Medicare and significant increase in health and hospital funding, the biggest increase since Bob Hawke, since Medicare was really funded and created. But within that, there's more that needs to be done within preventative health. We need to look at ongoing continuous funding models. We need to look at growing the contracts, because at the moment for our community health, it's a real patchwork of trying to put funding together. We also need to look at space, and I do want to address this because here in Castlemaine we have a great community health network, but not the space, not the facilities. And one of the commitments I make tonight and to Castlemaine is that I will work with Marie Edwards in trying to get the Castlemaine Community Health Hub off the ground so we can actually get a purpose-built building for our Castlemaine Community Health team here.
With regards to health, under Labour in 2013, funds for hospital and health services were $13.3 billion. This year, funding is up to $21.2 billion. Also, the coalition listed 2,000 medicines on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, on the PBS, worth $10.3 billion. When Labour was last in government, they couldn't list any medicines on the PBS because they ran out of money. It's very important that we don't judge based on promises, on plans. They may sound bright, but it's about delivering. It's about proved record. What's your record on that? What did you achieve so that we trust you? We have also boosted Medicare by $6 billion. We are funding cancer treatment by $1 billion. We need to look at proved records, not at promises. Thank you.
I'm going to bring it back to the question, which is about community health. And so that one of the promises that the Greens are making this election is that we're going to start a preventative health commission and put $200 million towards forming a national strategy to then form community level ideas that then mean that, you know, the community risk of stroke, of heart attack, of diabetes, whatever it happens to be, can be addressed so that at each community level we can start to have an individual strategy about what are the needs of the community, what sorts of things are becoming more prevalent, and what sorts of things can we do to stop, you know, greater health cost and, I guess, you know, poorer outcomes in health in 10, 20, 30 years' time. The other way we want to do that is we also want to boost outpatient services for mental health. That's a huge problem in our part of the world. We have GP services and psychologists, then we have hospital services and nothing really in between. So part of the Greens policy on mental health is to put significant investment into outreach so that we're bridging the gap between people who may, you know, just need sort of a counsellor or a psychologist to help them through their mental illness, you know, or acute services. There needs to be that gap bridged. And we also need to invest in personnel. The way we want to do that is that we want to take out the $6 billion that we spend on the private health insurance subsidy, essentially, you know, subsidising the profits of private health insurance companies, and put that back into public health where everyone uses it. And particularly in something like primary health or preventative health, we need to do that because we know as a nation we're going to continue to get older. We want to live in good health as we age, not with chronic diseases. Thanks.
Di, would you like a follow-up question to... Does anyone in the audience have a question regarding the community health topic?
Hi. Both the major political parties have talked about family violence and have promised to put money into services. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. Put money into services to help women and families escaping family violence and for other services that they need. But what I'm not seeing is preventative work around family violence. One woman a week at the moment is being killed in a family violence situation. This is not good enough. what are the parties going to do to actually turn around our society to stop the violence against women?
Thank you for the question, because it is a topic that I believe should come up at every single candidates forum, because it's a scourge that's on our society, and it's one we don't talk about enough, the fact that one woman roughly a week is losing their life. One of the commitments that Labor has made is that we're going to fund the Respectful Relationships program to be rolled out in every school. We know that that program works. The evidence is in. That is one way that we're actually going to help on the preventative side, is that Respectful Relationships program. Some have tried to link it to the Safe Schools program, equally an important program. Don't believe the rhetoric that's out there. These programs are vital. They save lives. They teach young people values. Another part of our commitment on family violence is when women leave, we're going to have packages where they can tap into a payment. We will actually have emergency funding for them. When you get up and go, you don't take a lot with you. You get out, it's about safety, you take your children. You need to re-establish your life. So we've set up packages where women can tap into funding, tap into money to reset up their lives. And we've also committed to paid family violence leave. So women can take days off from work, not lose their job, but can take days off work, can get their children into new schools, can meet with their lawyers, and to seek the medical, social, physical help that they need.
The coalition is investing $328 million to combat family violence, and that includes providing accommodation so that like you can leave the situation early on if you know that there is a place to go to. So this will resolve a big part of the problem. Also, providing training for police officers, especially for family violence, to address those problems. So, and it's an important part is also providing advice for people when and how to take action, not to leave it to late stages. And because there is support available, so they can do that early on before ending up in some catastrophes and so forth. Yeah, thank you.
At the risk of repeating the same points that Lisa's made, I think we share very similar priorities on this issue. And that is that clearly all family violence begins with disrespect of women. So that's why education is paramount. And so that's why the Greens want to also invest in that. We also want to invest in family violence leave. We also want to make sure that there is emergency housing available. And that's a critical point. We have a huge problem with crisis housing in Australia. In fact, we have a problem with public and community housing too. And that often is a big hang-up for people, because if they are trying to remove themselves from a very dangerous situation, but then facing financial and housing stress, that often becomes a barrier to them seeking a new life and for essentially ensuring their own safety. We need to make sure as a government that we're acting with compassion and working out what these barriers are, breaking them down one by one. And certainly the one that I see a lot, unfortunately, is housing stress.
Thank you. We're moving now to the third question from the RSA platform, which comes from Suzanne Donisthorpe about refugees in regional Victoria.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming along. This is about, everybody has a policy on refugees, and we know what goes on Manus. Now we've read Baruch Brochani's book. We know what kind of horror it is. I would be very interested to hear, A, what your parties are doing to save the people on Manus and Nauru from that excruciation that they've been suffering for so many years, and also about resettlement in Australian regions, specifically here, for people who come to this country.
Well, Rob, would you like to start this time?
Yeah, certainly. Look, first of all, we need to get everyone off Manus and Nauru. We need to shut down offshore processing for good. I say that hoping to bring the major parties around, but the truth is the Greens are the only ones that have been consistent on this for as many years as I can remember. Moving on from that point, however, we need to start seeing refugees and asylum seekers as an opportunity here in Australia. These are people that are trying to flee their homeland, not something that anyone ever wants to have to do, and are seeking protection. Australia can provide that protection. We're a wealthy country and we have the resources to do so. And then we also have the opportunity to foster amazing relationships with these new refugees who want to contribute to a new life in our country. So we want to increase our refugee intake to 50,000. It's about a 2.5-fold increase on what it is now. Thank you. We also want to increase private sponsorship of refugees. So allowing community members who already have supports in their local communities to then welcome new migrants in, new asylum seeker migrants in, and provide them with that localised support that often we find government programs lack because they're trying to give the same thing to each person. So I think that's important. But then the other thing is that we also want to incentivise settlement in rural and regional areas. There are various sectors of our community that require certain kinds of labour that then means that these people have a very good opportunity to settle into our community very well. Now that's not the same for every area, it needs to be individualised, but the Greens do want to see more asylum seekers and refugees in the regions contributing to the whole of our economy, not just our cities.
I just want to comment, if you increase the number of refugees to 50,000, how about the other million refugees out there around the world? How can we help them? So, yeah, this is a good point.
Please let our candidates answer.
This is a good point. We need to resolve the problem on a large scale. So instead of having refugees coming here, we need to help governments prevent persecution of minorities in their countries, in their home countries. And as it's said here, more education programs, leveraging governments, other countries, so that we help them where they are and we resolve the problem on a large scale. But if you increase the number, what message you are going to send to the world? If you are persecuted and you have a problem, come to Australia. And thank you. And that's what happened a few years ago. Numbers have increased and people drowned in the sea, and we couldn't have control on all that. So we have made some progress. We are still working on it. We need to acknowledge the progress that has been done so far, and we need to work more on it, and we should get there.
Sam, you do know that your party's made the largest foreign aid budget cuts in decades. You do know that,
right? Please note that it's not just about aid. Like if a foreign government is not protecting its minorities, you need to cut the aid. Why? To tell them, if you don't do your job, I will hold on the aid. But if you do it, I will increase the aid. So aid is not just you increase it regardless. No, you increase it if it helps you achieve your goal, which is protecting the minorities that are persecuted in their home countries.
Given the persecution of minorities in this country by our own government, I don't believe that we can be left in other countries. Let's just call it for what it is. In my response to the question that was asked, they are concentration camps. There's no other way you can describe Nauru and They were set up as offshore processing, and people haven't been processed. They need to be processed. Labor would immediately accept New Zealand's position to resettle refugees. We would also ask UNHCR to come in, because some of the refugees on Nauru and Manus Island have a claim against Australia because the Australian government is now the state that has committed the human rights violations. So we have to get the UNHCR involved. We've also committed to increase the refugee intake and also establish a fair community sponsorship program. So people who are already here can sponsor family members. Communities can sponsor family members. It's successful in the UK, it's successful in Canada, and it will be successful here because we have compassionate communities like Castlemaine, like Bendigo, who would help people. We've committed $500 million to the UNHCR to establish regional processing. Let's get back to when it worked under Gough Whitlam and even Malcolm Fraser. People come here in a fair way, in an inclusive way, and are not locked up in indefinite detention. That is wrong.
I think you're compromising our own people. I think these policies are compromising our own people. My priority first is the Australian people. And then refugees. We need to know our priorities. Refugees are important, but they don't come before Australians. Our borders must be secure.
Okay,
And if you see those policies, you really fear the security of our borders.
For shame.
Yeah, can I also just say though, if we want to have a debate about our borders, there are 84,000 people who've entered by plane in the last 4 years as tourists who've then claimed asylum. They've blown out the waiting queues. Like if you want to talk about who's lost control of our
That's
borders,
why now we are
let's
putting
have
a
a
cap.
debate.
That's why now
Let's
we
have
are
a
putting a
debate
cap
about
on the
the
number of
numbers.
refugees. But you are coming to say, I'm going to increase refugees.
I think
I'm gonna-
I'm sorry, we're out of time. We do have a limit on each question, but I appreciate all of the emotion in the debate. There is still time for a follow-up question. Suzanne, would you like to any point of clarification? Is anyone else in the audience? Let's see back there.
Hello. Sorry, I just wanted, was hoping Labor could just clarify, are you going to close offshore processing?
Our position is regional processing, and we will fund the UNHCR. That processing be done in 90 days, and wherever possible, people into community as quick as possible. So going back to the model that existed back in the 70s and back in the 80s when it was bipartisan, that we process people in countries of transit. They don't even risk trying to get on a boat. They've already been processed and flown to this country and resettled as refugees.
Can I just confirm, has your question been answered? All right. And the next question is going to be asked by Warwick Smith.
Hi, thanks all three of you for coming tonight. My question is really about your own personal thoughts and philosophy about representative democracy. So I'm curious to know how and to what extent would you determine the priorities of the electorate in order to effectively represent us in the Australian Parliament and within your own parties?
Look, I'm happy too because I've probably got a bit of an advantage in a way being the federal member here for 6 years. It does become a bit of a challenge because we live in a very diverse electorate. So whilst tonight we've focused on refugees, climate change and healthcare, when you're in the north of the electorate, it's a completely different focus, and we need to acknowledge that there's great diversity across our electorate. So the first challenge is understanding those differences and working out what are the priorities in the area. You as an MP can't be an expert in everything, but you have experts within your community. So the first part of representation is being able to listen and being able to advocate. Now, the Labor Party is a binding caucus, and I do stand up all the time and advocate in a binding caucus, and quite often it's against the popular position. I know I've got some friends here from the Castlemaine branch. They write to our party executive all the time, and their motions get read out in our caucus room. It's part of what you do, being active representative locally in your caucus, but most importantly in the Parliament. And I've demonstrated that in 6 years, willing to stand up and say what the community matters about, whether it be marriage equality, whether it be climate change, or whether it be human rights. these are the issues that this community cares about, and also too more broadly.
I'm just a bit disappointed because we don't see things getting done here. Like we always see blame on the government, but when it comes to action, we don't see many things happening. I believe that it's not just about understanding a problem or advocating for a problem. People want things done. Like a politician is always required to find solutions, to find ways or make one. So it's not about understanding where the problem is or listening to people. It's about getting things done. So what I'm really looking forward is getting the attention of the government and representing the electorate in a way that we all deserve, that we deserve it. Bendigo deserves, the Bendigo electorate deserves more. We have great potential. We are a true economic hub, and we need to work based on that.
Look, with respect, doing things without listening or understanding probably explains quite a lot of decisions that we're getting from the current coalition government. One of the things I have to do every day is I have to be a very good listener to the person that's sitting in front of me in the consultation room. There's a thing in general practice called the golden minute, and basically despite the temptation, you need to shut up for that whole minute to ensure that that person gives you the information you need to know to then formulate what's the problem here, what should be the appropriate solution for this person. That's the kind of approach I want to take to politics. I want to take an approach that, that people have to use in everyday life for real people with real problems and who experience real effects of government decisions. I want to take that approach of being, approachable, but also then listening and then being able to show that, by comprehension, understanding what this person has been speaking about, what then I am going to do about it, and then hopefully getting the right results for the community. Thanks.
Laura, do you have a follow-up question on that? Anyone on the topic of representation?
We talk about representation. I'd be interested to know what the three candidates think are the two most important issues for the Castlemaine community for you to represent to your party and also to the government after the election.
Would you like to start, Rob?
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question. Clearly, climate change is my number one priority. I think it's the greatest threat facing us all, but also one of the greatest opportunities over the next couple of decades for us to change our economy and change our society to something that's healthier and more sustainable. So that is my number one priority in Castlemaine, but also in everywhere. The second one is about service provision, really. I think a lot of people are becoming very distrustful of their governments because they don't see what the government is actually doing for them anymore. And that's because I think quite a lot of our service provision is getting bungled. So whether it happens to be aged care, there are more than 100,000, I think it's 150,000 in fact, people waiting on aged care packages for their home. Whether it's the NDIS, people try to navigate that minefield of a system and then come back to me and say, look, I'm trying to get the help I need, but this bureaucracy doesn't seem to want to help me. Whether it happens to be, about health and mental health, and people saying, well, where is this service that when I need it? I either have to go to hospital when I'm in crisis, or I can get nothing done with you. Or when it's education, when we see that money is being torn away from our public education system and put into various different pots of private education that are already really well funded. The skew it's skew if basically. So I think service provision is a huge problem in the community. I want to make it about people and not about vested interests.
Yeah, I think connectivity is one of the things that we hear a lot from people. We need fast rail between Bendigo and Melbourne. Infrastructure is very, very important, and the government has allocated $100 billion for infrastructure, and we want to see those funds coming to the region here. This is one thing. We also want to look at cost of living and bringing more jobs to the region. We need to feel for those who are doing it tough, and this doesn't mean that economy or climate change are mutually exclusive. No, we can achieve both. And as I've said before, we can invest in new technologies and it will take over without a fight. But at the same time, we need to help those who are doing it tough to be able to pay their bills. So we can do both. We don't need to find them like as opposing goals. No, they are. We can do both together. Thank you.
So the two key issues that come up when I'm in Castlemaine, like connectivity does come up. The NBN rollout has been a debacle and we have too many black spots. It does come up. Fair treatment of refugees, being more compassionate, funding for aid, it does come up. And it is something that this community cares about. But the two outstanding issues that come up at every listening post that I have, when I attend events, when I'm speaking to school children, the first is housing and homelessness and helping people with a disability get decent and affordable housing. It comes up over and over again. We don't have enough social community housing. We don't have enough public housing. There are great ideas, there are great innovative models here, but there's no funding, there's no coordination to make it happen. And the second one is climate change. Real action on climate change, and I just have to be in Castlemaine for 5 minutes before I get 5 different ideas on how we can meet those challenges, how we can tackle those challenges. Like, I almost want to come to Castlemaine and get you to write the government policy, because it's so, there's depth and experience in this community. And I'm not just talking about the ideas, I'm talking about the technical. Carbon farming, the solution is here with some of our farmers that we've got. MASH and the way in which they've rolled out bulk solar throughout the region. We have one of the highest uptakes of solar as an electorate, and it's being driven by Castlemaine and the Mount Alexander sustainability group.
Thank you. So that takes us to our final question, our wildcard question, which was entered onto the platform this morning. I'll read it out and we'll follow the same procedure and then we'll close the event. After one last comment on this topic. We might consult on that, but I think that's what we agree. A grim warning just issued by the UN Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services that species are declining at an unprecedented rate, with approximately 75% of land-based environments and over 60% of the marine environment already significantly altered. Australia, with some of the world's most diverse native life, and government data showing that Australia had the highest rate of native mammal extinction since European occupation, is the only developed country on a list of 11 global deforestation hotspots. How will your party, if elected, address this ongoing catastrophe in the light of the national environmental budget being reduced by more than 30% since 2013? Sam, would you like to do that?
Yeah, the coalition government is investing $3.5 billion for the environment. That includes handling this problem and others, like building Snowy 2, which is a renewable power station that will can provide power for 500,000 houses, and also protecting the Great Barrier Reef. It's not just the species, but it includes, it's an overall plan. Also the Great Barrier Reef, revegetation, and many things like that. So the government is able to invest this amount of money because of the strong economy that we have. So we are tackling all those issues.
So Labor's got a pretty comprehensive plan, and I'm going to try and do it in the quickest summary that I have. We've committed a lot of money, over $1 billion, to tackling this issue because it is multi-pronged. We want to ban single-use plastic and roll that out across the nation. We want to work with our states on making sure we have a national deposit scheme. We've got some work to do here in Victoria, and I recognise that. We also are going to restore the marine parks that were there, that were scrapped by this government. We need to protect our marine parks. And we're going to ban the super trawler because of what they are doing to a lot of our native species. We are also committed to working, and this $1 billion fund is to work with land care groups, work with conservation groups to do the work on country. We're going to significantly increase the Indigenous Rangers program. Let's get our First Nations people helping us to understand the land better. They have this knowledge, they have these skills. Let's give them the jobs so that they can get on with helping us restore country. We are committed. On the law side of things, we're going to beef up the Environmental Protection Agency and give the lawyers back the dollars so they can help prosecute some of these cases. And we are going to toughen up the laws. They've been weakened. We need to give stronger powers to the Environment Minister to intervene to make sure that we've actually got the ability for our environmental defenders to get in there and to have the argument on behalf of a lot of our native species. We can't afford not to. Whether they be insects or our great big whales, like I'm alarmed at what's happening with our insect population, our bee population, and the impact that that's going to have on our cropping and on our food production. Like the knock-on effect of not doing anything means we could be in a pretty dire place in not too long a time, so we have to act now. And so it's a multi-pronged approach. And again, this is one of those topics that comes up everywhere I go in every school. Students worked this out a long time ago, and now we need a government that just backs them in and backs the community in so we can start to get some real progress in this area.
So the Greens also have a very comprehensive nature policy. We have a conservation and nature fund that is built at $2 billion because we think that is the amount that we need to ensure that no endangered species becomes extinct. That is our goal. And so the way we want to do that is clearly that we need to also curb invasive species, but we also need to make sure that the environments that flora and fauna are in are being maintained and regenerated. So part of that is land care, part of that is Indigenous Rangers, part of that is all of these processes to help regenerate the land. But then we also have to take a good look at ourselves and go, what are we doing to all of these different areas that is destroying the landscapes as we know it already? On the Great Barrier Reef, why are we opening up the Galilee Basin to coal mining? Why are we allowing all of that to go into our rivers and into the Great Barrier Reef? Why are we opening up the Northern Territory to gas? Why are we doing coal seam gas and fracking in 2019? Why are we doing all these things? Why are we aiming to do offshore drilling in the Great Australian Bight? It seems like we actually don't care about any of these environments. And until we start having a good hard look at ourselves and changing the way we approach these sorts of things, our endangered species will continue to go extinct and our ecosystems will continue to be unbalanced. Australia has one of the, of all countries in the world, we have some of the most unique flora and fauna on the planet, and we have the most to lose. So this should be a resource that we're trying to protect.
Follow-up question on that one, Warwick?
Thanks. I think actually neither of you who represent the two parties who potentially will form government really answered the question, which was about Australia being the only developed world that is a hotspot for vegetation clearance. The developed country in the world. So, that's the question. We're clearing our native vegetation at an alarming rate, and it's largely a state government responsibility, but the Commonwealth Government has some power over that, and I'd be interested to hear what you think we should do about that.
Yeah, sorry, apologies, I didn't take that from the question that was asked, but Labor has, we voted against the weakening of the environmental laws that the government actually introduced around land clearing. We as a party across all states want to stop land clearing. We've got the state of Victoria that was one of the first to lead. Queensland's just come on board, and until Queensland could get the numbers through their parliament, Queensland was worse than Brazil in terms of deforestation. It's been unpopular, but it's needed to happen. So in terms of land clearing, absolutely agree, it's got to stop, and we have to have safeguards in place. We've also committed a fund in terms of trying to reverse it and working with farmers, working with industry that's part of the carbon farming initiative, but it's also about planting more native species, rebuilding the biolinks and the corridors so we can trees essentially help us decarbonise, so we actually have to get them back in the ground. That's the future plan, but what we've got to do, and what Labor has done at a state level and will do at a federal level, is restore the toughest measures in place around land clearing.
There is, sorry, just to clarify, there is actually a difference in definition between land clearing and deforestation, which is what this has mentioned. Because it's about the size of the shrubs and the trees and so forth, but I just wanted to clarify that.
And in Victoria, we have government-sanctioned deforestation. We have Big Forest, we have the regional forest agreements that have been an absolute disaster. So I do think, yes, it is about environmental laws with teeth, but we need politicians and parties that are actually willing to give these laws teeth. And that aren't beholden to powerful vested interests and aren't beholden to political donations that might be counterintuitive to what we're trying to achieve. Thank you. On a second point about that, yes, we do have a huge amount of land clearing, we do have a huge amount of deforestation, but it's about, oh sorry, I've been off mic there a little bit. It is also about changing those industries and changing them to something more sustainable. We can't continue to log even new growth forests while we want to also save the planet. We're trying to restore carbon to the soil, and we won't be able to do that at the rate we're going.
Thank you. We've made a call with the team here that we have one more, we have time for one more question from the audience. Oh, sorry. I apologise. You're finished. Okay. The gentleman in the back there, I'll pass you the microphone.
Thank you for that. I don't often get called a gentleman. I was the author of that question, by the way, so you have me to blame for that. The question, I speak as a grandfather with grandchildren, and I look into the future generation, and many of the questions come out of that question that I asked. There's one specific item that we haven't addressed, which is fairly obvious from the T-shirt that I'm wearing, that what are we doing about the biggest existential threat to climate pollution that is immediate and ongoing, namely the exploitation of thermal coal. I stress that, thermal coal in the Galilee Basin, which is started with the Indian company Adani, who is a Cayman Island registered company, for your information, trying to take the profits out of Australia on a false promise of work for people, with a policy of automation of people out of the work. What is each party's position on the now problem of the proposed Adani coal mine?
I'll start with you, Rob.
I was hoping you'd say that. I want to, in the strongest terms possible, say that the Greens are committed to ensuring that Adani does not go ahead. Thank you. But more than that, while the campaign has been around the Adani mine in the Galilee Basin, we also have to realise there are about half a dozen other mines that are also planned for that same area. It is a large area. Clive Palmer's mine is right next door, and he's currently trying to run for Parliament so he can get it made. Now that's abhorrent to me. When the threat is so real, and when we can so easily do something about it by not digging that thermal coal out of the ground, by not exporting it overseas, by not burning it in our coal power plants here in Australia, I think we'd all be extremely neglectful if we didn't stand up to it. But it's not just that, it's not just coal, it is also gas in Australia as well. We need to ensure that in the Northern Territory we're not opening up 400 years worth of gas fields. That's not a transition fuel. We need 100% renewable energy by 2030 and to rapidly decarbonise the economy. Thanks.
First thing I want to say that anything we want to achieve in a peaceful way. We want to achieve in a way that maintains our unity. We don't want to polarize the people and make fights. And many of that will not help our country. So if you have a great cause, you need to advocate for it in a peaceful way. And this is the first important point. The second one is, if there is, for example, a store in a shopping mall that sells low quality products, can you come to the store owner and ask him to close down because he sells low quality products? You can't do that. Why? Because if he sells low quality products, no one will buy from him and he will be forced out of business without you coming and asking him to close down his store. So we need to achieve our goal in the right way. If we have the renewable energy, we invest in it, we have it affordable and reliable, what will happen? Adani will close down on its own. So what we need to do is to invest in renewable and have it reliable, affordable, and then we don't worry about the rest. It will just replace the old technology.
And 3 degrees of warming.
Yeah, but what if it's already going? So the short answer to that about what the Liberal National Party are doing is they're doing whatever they can to let Adani go ahead, even to the extent that they've doctored the evidence. Like, I've been to Central Queensland, I've seen the billboards, I remember the questions in question time. They will do whatever they can to see Adani go ahead. We know the Greens' position and Labor's position. That's what I'm going to outline right now. Our position, we don't have a position as a political party to ban coal. What we have and what we've said about Adani, like all coal mining projects, it needs to stack up environmentally. Now this project has real question marks about it, and that case will continue. It still has a number of hurdles to go. It also has to stack up economically in terms of funding. They have to find their own sources. We have said that they will not get a cent of taxpayers' money. They will not get a cent of taxpayers' money to build the railway to get the coal out. That is another big part of their problem. There are 6 other coal mines that have already been approved in this area, but none of them have started operation because they haven't worked out how to get the coal out. Equally, other coal mines across Queensland have been approved. We need to broaden out this debate and bring people with us about how do we transition, not just here in Australia, but across the world. Another Labor policy is a just transition. We want to see a phase out of coal-fired power stations in Australia. If that is the position we take here in Australia, then that's a position that we do want to take to the rest of the world to say, we can do it, you can do it too. The debate isn't quite there yet in those coal communities, and we have to reach out and engage with them. We have to help to transition them to newer, greener, cleaner energies and jobs.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question to that one. So we're school strikers, and so as the younger generation, we need rapid action on climate change so that we can have a future. So what are your thoughts on the school strikes and what we're advocating for? Our 3 demands: stop Adani, no fossil fuels, and 100% renewable by 2030.
in relation to those, we've just sort of answered those. Our position on Adani is it needs to stack up environmentally, and we'll apply the law, and we won't put the country at sovereign risk. What we've also said in regards to fossil fuels, we're going to hit a 50% renewable energy target by 2030, and we want to make sure that we reduce our carbon emissions by 45%. What I do want to say about our student strikers is good on you for taking a stand. It is a critical part of our democracy that anybody be able to protest and participate in action and stand up in what they believe in. I've had the privilege to meet the student strikers when they've been at the front of my office. The only time I haven't got to meet them was last Friday because I wasn't in town. But we've had students from Castlemaine visit us in Canberra. They've met with Bill Shorten and put their case to Bill Shorten in the strongest possible terms. That's people from this town. People from this town that got an audience with who I hope will be the next Prime Minister, putting forward the case on climate change. That's pretty powerful. So good on our students for stepping up and taking the debate and getting the world's attention on this issue. Protesting is a big part of our democracy. Standing up and having a say is a big part of who we are. And I just really want to congratulate the students for stepping up and doing it.
I'm very happy that students are involved, they have a say, they think about it. But I also want to remind them, when, for example, you go to your parent and ask for to buy a car, and your parent can't afford, will you go and tell him, no, I want to buy the car by the end of this year? You can't do that, right? When we need to pay a price, we know that some people will not be able to pay their power bills. Some people will find the cost of living unbearable. And this is a huge price that we need to consider when we stop projects or when we fight industries. So we need to accommodate everyone. We are for the environment and at the same time for the people and for the economy. So go ahead and say your view and at the same time be willing to listen to the other point of view, to accommodate other people's too. And I encourage all students, and I'm very happy with what you're doing, and I encourage you to do more of that.
I want to start by thanking you for adding your voice to our democracy. The reason for that is because this will affect you in more than probably anyone else in this room. And our future is at risk if we don't get this right. The Adani doesn't environmentally stack up at all. We know that already. All that remains is the political will to say no. And the same thing goes for any new fossil fuels. The political will requires us to say no in this situation. So what I want governments to be able to do when there are movements like this that are capturing our nation is to take a step back for a second, shut up and listen, and have a think about it. I know that you're both very well informed on this issue, and those three demands are very simple. All it really is about is making sure that we have a quick transition to renewable energy and away from what's killing us. And so that means that we need to make sure we get completely out of coal, we need to get completely out of fossil fuels, and it must be done in a graded, coordinated fashion. So it is very simple. And I want to then end this sort of little part of tonight with a simple plea. This is everyone's future that's at stake. I want 100% renewable energy. I want to see a cleaner future for everyone, not just the wealthy few. So if you join me in sharing that view, I suggest you vote Green, because none of the other two parties will meet the school strike for climate's demands.
Thank you, and that closes the question part of the evening. I think we've had a really diverse and wide-ranging discussion. I want to thank all the candidates here for the difficult and thankless job of running for office. without people willing to run, we wouldn't have diverse representation and democracy. And it's particularly thankless work for those people who are running in a seat that isn't contested. We're really grateful for all of your efforts to enrich our democracy and create a space where ideas can be contested. So thank you all for that this evening. I'd like to also give you an opportunity to say the last few words if you'd like to the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. We have a real choice this election. Sometimes it feels like we don't that much in Australia because we all tend to agree a lot. But I think we've got three different positions here on the stage, and I think that's really good for democracy because it means that we get to choose how we want to spend our next few decades. You can choose to continue with the way we're currently doing things. You can choose 3 degrees more warming by 2050. You can choose to end winter as we know it. You can choose for lower rainfall, less water for our farmers. You can choose to continue with the extinction process that we're seeing before our eyes. Or you can say you've had enough. And the way you say that is by at the ballot box voting Green. The reason why I say that is because we're not coerced, we don't take donations from big corporations, we don't take donations from vested interests. Our policies, we're advocating for them because we think they're right. And that's simply it. And that's why I'm up here on the stage not being a doctor tonight, because I prefer for us to get our future right. So, in closing, thank you very much for being here. Ensure that you use your vote wisely on May the 18th or earlier if you choose to vote early. And thank you for allowing me to speak before you tonight.
Thank you all for this discussion. It was great to exchange views and discuss various opinions. And I want to say that always the best way, in my opinion, is the balanced way. You can dream about great, a high rate of carbon emission reduction, or you can do none, but always the balanced way is in my view, is the right way. Extremes will not result in what we want and may affect other sectors, which we don't want. Second point, we need also to judge performance based on records, based on not on promises, not on plans, but based on real achievements. And regardless whether we have disagreement on some views, I am very happy to be with you all tonight, and I thank you all for being here. Thank you.
So this election is about choices, and being in government is about priorities. And the way our Westminster system works, there are two political parties that are in a position that can form government. The Liberal National Party, who've done a lot of dodgy deals with far right-wing parties that we're learning more and more about every day, that is creating chaos. Why? Because they have a lot of far right-wing people in their party, and we're seeing that. The damage that has been done to our democracy, our community, our economy has to stop. The alternative is the Labor Party, and what they put on the table is a willingness to engage, the ability to bring the country together to work through these complex plans. We do have the coal miners that are in our party, and we have the environmental activists in our party. If we are going to work through this together, we have to bring our nation together to really resolve this issue. We can't afford to see violence like we've seen up in central Queensland. That is not a solution. Those wars are not the solution. Let's bring people together and work through all of these challenging issues. Better funding for our schools, better funding for our hospitals, making sure that we haven't even talked about this tonight, the challenges of what's going on in our workplace. 50% of our workplace are now casual and stuck in insecure work. Another major challenge that we have going forward. Beyond the issues that we've discussed tonight, think about the entire platform that's being put forward and who's going to deliver the fairest go for all of us that live here in Australia, in Castlemaine, and in the broader electorate of Bendigo.
so much again, and perhaps there's an opportunity to have some discussion amongst all of us as we close this evening. And thank you all very much for coming and for your respectful attention and excellent questions. Good night.